Welcome back to Storyality. It's like Cliff's Notes for fighting games. Today we're looking at Tekken 3. Tekken 3 is actually set 19 years after Tekken 2, and a lot happens in that time. There's also not very many returning characters, which we'll learn about. In that time, Heihachi Mishima's company, the Mishima Zaibatsu, has grown more powerful than ever, and is credited as being responsible for bringing about world peace. But Heihachi isn't one to rest on his laurels. He's formed the Tekken Force, an elite squad of soldiers that do his bidding. It's basically his own private army. He's also continued his hunt for buried treasure around the world, and in Mexico, he's found more than he bargained for. His archaeologists dug up Ogre, the god of fighting, who killed almost all of the team that discovered him before fleeing. For the next several years, Ogre traveled across the globe killing martial artists, and we're to assume this is what's happened to a large number of our characters. When Ogre attacked and killed Jun, the woman from the previous game who got pregnant from Kazuya, her son Jin, following his mother's final instruction, goes running to his grandfather Heihachi, begging to be trained as a fighter. Heihachi spent years training Jin, and then decides to announce the third Iron Fist, or Tekken, tournament. He's told the world that it's to gather together a group of fighters powerful enough to destroy Ogre, but secretly, he's hoping to capture Ogre for research so that he can learn enough from his unique biology to help Heihachi take over the world, and he's perfectly willing to throw away his grandson to accomplish this goal. And that's a lot more story than we've previously had in Tekken, but with that out of the way, let's meet our returning character, the few that Ogre hasn't supposedly killed. First up is Nina Williams, our assassin. Nina's had an interesting time since the previous game. When her sister Anna prevented her from killing Kazuya in the last tournament, both sisters were grabbed by Mishima Zaibatsu agents and forced to serve as lab rats for a cryogenic experiment by Dr. Boskanovich, the same madman who created the boxing dinosaur. When Ogre was awakened in Mexico, somehow a psychic shockwave went out across the world and it woke up Nina and her sister. Although Nina has lost all of her memories, all she knows is that she must kill Jen. Next is Li Wulong, the Hong Kong super cop. Li was able to find his partner's killer, Bruce, in the previous tournament, but Bruce was presumed killed when he was in yet another plane crash on his way to justice. Unable to prove that Bruce is still alive despite his suspicions, Li has continued to be a super cop. While investigating the disappearance of several martial artists, presumably because of Ogre, he is invited by Heihachi to join the tournament. Next is Paul Phoenix, best known as the guy who looks like he's wearing a chef's hat made of hair. His story so far has simply been seeking to be the greatest warrior in the world. I don't think I've addressed this before, but he's American, which is probably why he doesn't need any greater motivation for his character than simply being the best. Paul is still very angry, because in Tekken 2, he had actually earned the right to battle Kazuya in the final round, the only fighter he's ever failed to beat. But Paul got stuck in a traffic jam on the way to the tournament and was disqualified. Yeah, I'm not making it up. This character's backstory involves a traffic jam. Paul has spent the last 19 years training every day, just hoping for the chance to redeem himself, and when he gets invited to Tekken 3, he sees his opportunity. Next up is our Robin Hood ninja, Yoshimitsu. Concerned with the disappearance of fighters worldwide, Yoshimitsu visits his friend Dr. Boskanovich, the same friend he rescued from a helicopter last game, and the same doctor who created boxing dinosaurs, boxing kangaroos, and put our assassin sisters into cryogenic sleep. Busy guy. At some point in his experiments he became infected with something, and he explains to Yoshimitsu that he needs a sample of Ogre's blood in order to survive. So Yoshimitsu enters the tournament to help his friend. And that's it for returning fighters that you can play as from the beginning. The next 3 returning fighters are unlockable, and I want to point out the unlockable characters in this game function a little differently from before. You start unlocking characters based on how many times you beat the game, but it doesn't matter who you beat it with. If you beat the game 9 times with the same character, you'll still unlock almost all the characters. The alternate way to unlock characters is to simply select a character, any character, and fight with them. After 750 matches, you'll unlock everything. There are 2 characters you can unlock differently, and we'll address those when we get to them. But I'm not going to waste your time telling you how many times you need to beat the game to unlock these characters. Just know that they're unlockable characters. Our first unlockable returnee shouldn't be much of a surprise. It's Nina's sister, Anna. Now, we've mostly covered Anna's story, but there is an interesting difference in their backstory. Nina's backstory says that both of them were grabbed for the cryo test. Anna's backstory says that Nina chose to participate in the test, and that Anna volunteered afterwards because she'd miss her sister. Either somebody wasn't checking the stories against each other, or their backstories are given to us by an unreliable narrator. Either way, Anna is now dedicated to trying to help her sister get her memories back. Our next unlockable returnee is Gun Jack. Jane, the little girl we saw in Jak 2's ending in the previous game, has spent 19 years attempting to rebuild her friend. Finally, she breaks into the Mishima Zaibatsu to steal an experimental program for Gun Jack, which she uses to finish upgrading her robotic pal who's fun to be with. Our final returning unlockable character is Heihachi Mishima. And if I have to explain to you again who he is, you really haven't been paying attention. Heihachi is older than ever, but tougher than ever. We covered most of his story in the intro, but I want to make sure we're very clear. The only reason he trained up his grandson Jin is so that they could lure Ogre out. He's hoping that Jin will be destroyed, especially since Jin is showing that he's inherited his father's devil gene. And now it's time to meet the new warriors. First, let's meet this game's protagonist, Jin Kazama, the child of Jun and Kazuha from the previous game. Like Heihachi, we covered most of Jin's story in the beginning of this video. He's trained with his grandfather to defeat Ogre, the god of fighting, after Ogre killed his mother. Next up is Eddie Gordo. Eddie is a master of, and I'm gonna pronounce this wrong, capoeira, which is a fighting dance style that's really always so much fun to watch. Eddie grew up in a rich family in Brazil. His father was just about to legally take down several drug kingpins when he was murdered. As he was dying, he begged his son to take credit for the crime so that his son could safely hide away in prison. Another Dad of the Year award. In prison, Eddie learned capoeira, and when he got out of prison, he joined the tournament hoping that a win would grant him the resources to find his father's killers. Next is Forrest Law. Forrest is the son of martial law from the previous games. He learned how to fight from his father, but was forbidden to actually enter any tournaments. That's when Paul Phoenix showed up. Not knowing that his father wouldn't allow it, Paul takes Forrest with him to enter the tournament and show off his abilities. Next is Hwarang, which I'm sure I'm not pronouncing correctly. I am sorry for my horrible pronunciations. Hwarang is a student of Baekdo-san from the previous game, and in the space between games, he's become Jin's rival. When Ogre kills Baek, Hwarang enters the tournament for revenge. Next is King 2. I'm counting this as a new character because we learned that the original king that we've known so far was killed by Ogre, and that his friend Armor King trained one of the orphans from King's orphanage to become the new king. King 2, who after this point we'll just call King, as the game does, was entered into the tournament by his mentor to get revenge. So why do I count King 2 as a new character when I count all of the Jacks as a returning character? Because I can. That's why. You're not the boss of me. The last of our regular new characters is Ling Jiayu. Another name I'm sure I'm pronouncing wrong. Ling is a 16-year-old schoolgirl, because this is a Japanese game, and I'm amazed it took 3 whole games to introduce the Japanese schoolgirl. Ling's dream is to build the greatest amusement park ever near her home, so she went out in search of the richest man in the world, Heihachi Mishima, to make it happen. After getting in a fight with his guards and beating them all, Heihachi was highly amused, and promised to build her the greatest amusement park ever if she wins the tournament. And now let's look at our unlockable new characters. First is Brian Fury, at last, a name I have no trouble pronouncing. Brian Fury was dead, which is an odd way to begin a backstory. Dr. Abel, our mad scientist who didn't create boxing dinosaurs, resurrected Brian as a cyborg and assigned him to steal research data from Dr. Boskanovich. So Brian decides to join the tournament in order to get close to Yoshimitsu, who is friends with Dr. Boskanovich. I feel like you could have an entire franchise with just these 2 mad scientists building things to throw at each other. Next is Julia Chang, adopted daughter of Michelle Chang from the previous games. When martial artists start disappearing, Michelle went to confront Heihachi thinking he was behind it, and she never returned, so Julia is out to find out what happened to her mother. And now, it's time for some Tekken silliness. Next is Kuma 2, The Return of the Bear. It's assumed that Kuma 1 has died of old age by the time of this game, but not before having a son, which Heihachi also trained in the martial arts. Kuma 2 has two burning passions. The first is defeating Paul Phoenix, who once humiliated his father, and the second is winning the love of Panda. Who is Panda, you ask? Our next fighter is Panda, the pet of Ling, the schoolgirl. Because having a schoolgirl in an international fighting championship against a god isn't silly enough, she has to have a pet panda. She learned some advanced bear fighting techniques from Heihachi before entering the tournament, and advanced bear fighting techniques goes on the list of things I never thought I'd say. But the silliness doesn't stop there, oh no. Our next unlockable new character is Mokujin. Yes, Mokujin is a 2,000-year-old training dummy that was brought to life by the same psychic shockwave that woke up the Williams sisters. Nobody knows for sure why it joined the tournament, but clearly it wants to defeat Ogre. Next up is, well, Tiger Jackson. Now, Tiger Jackson isn't fully its own character. It's a disco-inspired costume for Eddie Gordo. He doesn't get his own unique backstory, but he does get his own unique ending, so we're going to go ahead and count him. The next unlockable fighter we're talking about is Ogre, the boss himself. Ogre's motivations aren't really that in-depth. After being awoken, he goes around the world attacking martial artists and absorbing their chi and abilities. Ogre actually has a second form called True Ogre, which is separately unlockable, but does not have a unique backstory or ending. But we're not done. We've got two more characters that are credited as special characters. These two are unlocked a little differently. The first is Gon. You unlock Gon by beating the game with all non-hidden characters. Gon is actually a licensed character from a manga called, shockingly enough, Gon. He's a small dinosaur, and he's not given any backstory in this game. And our final character, treated as a super unlockable bonus character, is Dr. Boskanovich. You unlock him by playing through a minigame called Tekken Force multiple times. He created the Jack robots, the boxing kangaroo, the boxing dinosaur, put the Williams sister into cryosleep, and the reason for all of this? He's trying to find a way to bring his dead daughter back to life. And, like we learned in Yoshimitsu's opening, one of his experiments infected him, and he needs Ogre's blood to survive. Again, I feel compelled to warn you that not all Tekken endings are substantive. Some endings are just silly, short, and inconsequential things. Others get endings about the character or story. That's just the nature of Tekken. Nina's ending shows Anna actually being kind to her sister, trying to reawaken her memories with a visit to their father's grave. When it works, Nina briefly attacks her sister before leaving. Anna just lays on the ground, smiling, happy to have her sister back. Lee's ending just shows Lee practicing martial arts throughout multiple seasons. Paul's ending shows Paul getting pulled over for speeding and getting a ticket. I'm going to guess that this happened while he was on his way to the final battle, kind of an echo as to missing the last final battle because of a traffic jam, but we're not given that information. I just think it would have some nice symmetry to it. Anna's ending actually has two versions depending on what country you're playing the game in. Both versions involve the sisters relaxing on the beach while approached by three muscly men. The Japanese ending has Nina pulling off Anna's top in front of them to embarrass her. The American version simply shows Anna walking off with all three men, leaving Nina alone. Gunjack's ending is largely a repeat of Jak 2's ending from the previous game. A Mashima scientist called Dr. Abel attempts to destroy Gunjack with a satellite laser, only this time, Gunjack has a shield. Heihachi's ending shows that after defeating Ogre and watching Ogre dissolve away, Heihachi throws his grandson Jin out of a helicopter, because that's how this family rolls. Eddie's ending shows him attacking a drug lord, trying to find out who killed his father. The drug lord, as he's dying, points to a picture of Kazuha as his boss. Forrest's ending shows Forrest returning home to his angry father alongside Paul. The three train together, and we see that Forrest is a better fighter than either of them. Hwoarang's ending shows that after winning the tournament, he came across Jin being hunted by Heihachi's forces. Eager to face Jin himself, Hwoarang beats up the guards, only to see Jin transform into devil mode and fly away. King's ending shows him winning a luchador wrestling match, and shows us that Armor King is almost dead due to his heart condition we learned about in the last game. Ling's ending shows Heihachi keeping his promise and building for her an amusement park, but when Heihachi Land turns out to be pretty lame, Ling beats him up. Brian Fury's ending shows Brian beating up a bunch of Tekken Force guys. That's it. Julia's ending is the first ending in the series to feature voice acting. She finds her mother, who explains that Heihachi was trying to control Ogre using her pendant from the previous games, which tells us that Ogre is the mystical treasure that has been associated with Michelle Chang's character for the first 2 games. The women then return home. Panda and Kuma 2's endings are exactly the same. It shows Kuma 2 trying and failing to woo Panda. Mokujin's ending is pure insanity. It involves him fighting with a female Mokujin, and then challenging her to a game of Tekken 3, and then her beating him up. I can't even with this. Tiger Jackson's ending shows him cutting a rug to some disco music. Not much of an ending, but he's not much of a unique character. Ogre's ending shows Ogre turning into true Ogre and standing supreme over a burning temple, destroying helicopters. Gon's ending shows him encountering various wildlife in a wacky manner. Unlike any other ending in Tekken, Gon's ending runs on an endless loop. You actually have to turn off the console to stop it. Yoshimitsu and Dr. Boskanovich's endings are identical. An experiment with Ogre's blood goes very badly, and Yoshimitsu and his doctor friend flee a rodent of unusual size. And the canonical ending is Jin's. After a long hard battle, Jin is able to defeat Ogre. And that's when Heihachi and his soldiers fill Jin full of bullets. Jin drops to the ground, but then his devil gene kicks in. He then throws his grandfather through a temple wall before flying off into the night. And that's it for Tekken 3, but that's not the end of Devil Jin, or Heihachi's attempts to take over the world. I'll see you guys back here for Tekken 4.